Hebrews chapter 13. We talked last time about one of the most reassuring verses, I think, in all of the Bible. And it's just part of the verse 5. It's set in the context of our attitude toward money and contentment, because those two things go hand in hand. But then he says, well, let me read verse 5. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. That's a big deal, because here's why. God has said, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. And then he goes on, verse 6, so we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mortals do to me? This is affirming kinds of things, right? I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. And if I believe that, and saying it with confidence, I suppose I could just say it with confidence whether I believe it or not. I mean, actors do that all the time, but we're not talking about actors. We're talking about just people like you and like me. And the Hebrew writer says, so we say with confidence. Where does our confidence come from on this? Because what we're saying with confidence is pretty important. The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. I struggle with anxiety. I've told you that a billion times, I guess. And the fear factor is pretty much at the top on my emotional well-being. My amygdala gets tripped pretty easily. And I work with that. I try to do interventions against it. Heck, I take medicine for it. All of those things are okay, and they're probably good. The bottom line, though, I have to return to over and over and over again, is that my confidence is not in my ability to execute these interventions. My confidence is not even in my meds. My confidence is in God. I'll admit to you, some days I'm more confident than others. That's not God's problem, that's my issue. Then the writer quotes Psalm 118. The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? Well, actually, mere mortals can do a lot. They can physically hurt me. They can emotionally hurt me. In, I guess, the final worst case, they could execute me. That's not the worst that could happen to me. Because here's why I have confidence, and I know the Lord's my helper, because he's going to help me into the kingdom of heaven for that final time. I mean, eternally. I'm not going to be afraid. Well, yeah, sometimes I'm afraid, but I have to return to the truth. He'll never leave me. He'll never forsake me. Here's one of my problems. It doesn't always feel true. Does it for you? Because if it does, man, I want your secret. I want to know how you do that. I have temporary lapses in my confidence. And these are not intellectual lapses, they're emotional lapses. It doesn't feel like he's here, like he won't abandoned me. He never has and he never will. It doesn't feel like that. I feel alone. I feel trapped. I feel hopeless. I'm grateful that these are transitory feelings, but those feelings can be so strong that they overrule my thinking, what I know to be true. I haven't figured exactly how to make that stop. What I know is my feelings, my thoughts, and my behaviors they're all connected. If my feelings override my thinking, that's when I get into trouble, because my behaviors resulting from that, they're irrational. And there are times when, if my thinking trumps my feeling, that enables me, it gives me resources to choose behaviors that are rational and that, as best they can, work. So I don't want to do a psychoanalytical thing here, but in a sense, I think I need to talk about our feeling, our thinking, and our doing. I believe that is the progress. That's the model that our brains work from. We feel something, then we need to think about that feeling to evaluate: is it true? Is it true now but won't be later? And if it's true, it will be true later. But if it's not true, the feeling can be very real and incredibly powerful, but not true. If it's not true, then my thinking has to figure out, okay, what then, instead of that, will I settle on? Because that then is the base from which I choose my doing. And when I do that, I'll get a feeling from it. Usually the feeling comes, it feels like it worked or feels like it didn't work. If on the basis of that feeling, I execute thinking, right? And I analyze and evaluate that feeling. And from that analysis, I choose a doing. And it becomes a cycle of progress in my life. But if I put feeling behind the steering wheel, it's a cycle of dysfunction that's going to happen in my life. I have grown up hearing people say, trust your gut, go with your feelings. All I can say is that didn't work very well for me. And yeah, there are times when God is prompting me, and I just feel it down in my gut. I get that. But if I'm waiting for that on everything, it never worked in my life. I don't think it's going to work in anybody's life. Okay. All right. The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mortal man do to me? And then he breaks with that, and in verse 7 moves on to another arena or aspect of life. Remember your leaders who spoke the word of God to you. So we're not talking governmental leaders. We're talking spiritual leaders who spoke the word of God to you. Don't leave the context out historically. When these leaders spoke the word of God, they weren't reading from the Bible necessarily, because frankly, the New Testament was being written at that time, but hadn't been completed, and it was not widely available. Often, and maybe most times, these spiritual leaders would have read from the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, the injunctions and the commands and the comfort that are found there. But God spoke through men, people, and that's what we get from as our New Testament. Remember your leaders who spoke the word of God to you. For us, who is that? Well, teachers and preachers and friends and family members. Who speaks the word of God to you? I'm blessed because I am part of a church where they speak the word of God Sunday by Sunday. I'm also blessed because I have this free app on my phone, the U version of the Bible, and every morning God speaks to me through His Word. Leviticus, I'm sorry, I don't get much out of it. The message there for me is sin costs, always will. But I'm in Joshua right now and reading the narrative of the conquering of the promised land by the Israelites, led by Joshua, who spoke the word of God to them. It's inspiring to me. Okay. But there's a condition here. He goes on to say, consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. There are things about any leader that there's no good reason to imitate. We're humans. What I would want anybody in my life that's going to imitate anything in my life would be faith. And I'll come back to it. I guess it's just a feeling, but it's also a truth. My faith is not very big sometimes. I haven't lost faith, and I'm not running away from it. But I have friends whose faith is much bigger and deeper than mine. But whoever your leader is, imitate their faith. And then it goes on. It seems like a little bit of a disconnected thought in verse 8. Jesus is the same yesterday and today and forever. Here's what I get from that. Whoever the leader was that spoke the word of God into my life is fallible. They are imperfect. They're human, and they're going to make mistakes. They're going to sin. I mean, it comes down to that. But part of that is even the most consistent person you know has failures of consistency, but not Jesus. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Past, present, and future. Probably got to do some more thinking about that next time when we get together for Soul Care with Stevie Boy.